and welcome back to 303. We are in Senior English A, and our project now is to work with the Edmund Spenser poem, Sonnet 75. I'm with you on page 256. I want to say two things about this poem before we exegete really quickly. One, in this poem, you have to understand a word picture, or this poem isn't going to make a lot of sense. A strand is another word for a beach. Okay? And a guy and a girl are walking down the beach, and he picks up a stick, and he writes her name in the sand. Okay? But then the waves come and wipe it away. All right? So he does it again, writing her name in the sand, and then she's going to say something to him that's going to be kind of ironic and funny, and then he's going to say something back to her that will be the point at the end of the poem that we're going to want to write down. In other words, there's something going on. Number two, just to remind, Spenser is writing this collection, the sequence of sonnets, all for his girl. Okay? The reason is so that, two reasons. One, so that he can tell her he loves her. Two, well, let's get to this poem to find out what the second reason is. Why does he write all these poems for his girl? What is his motivation? Let's read. This is a pretty simple poem, by the way. In comparison to the language of the other two that we've been studying of the Spenser sonnets, this one is a little bit easier. By the way, notice right away, you can write this down at 2B. Notice, 14 lines makes it a sonnet. Notice the end rhyme. Strand, hand, away, pray. Do you see it? I'm just looking at the last words of the lines, right? This is the poetic intentionality that we were talking about earlier. And finally, we have pa-pum, 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 pa-pum. One day I wrote her name upon the strand. One day I wrote her name upon the strand. Pa-pum, 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 pa-pum. By the way, just to remind, part of the work with us in our 303 senior year is to actually write your own sonnet, right? Where you have to construct 14 lines of iambic pentameter. Studying these kinds of poems helps us get there. But let's go ahead and look now at the word picture itself. One day, I wrote her name upon the strand, the beach. But came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. Vain man, said she, that dost in vain essay a mortal thing, so to immortalize. For I myself shall like to this decay, and eke my name be wiped out likewise. Not so, quote I. Let baser things devise to die in dust, but you shall live by fame. My verse, your virtues rare shall eternize, and in the heavens write your glorious name. Whenas death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live, and later life renew. Now, let's take a look at this poem and understand it as a three-part dance. You want to write it down as this. It's kind of a three-part dance, a three-part movement. There's basically three things that happen in the poem. Let's annotate really quickly at level 1, just to make sure we know what's going on. Notice, first, one day I wrote her name upon the strand, the beach, but came the waves and washed it away. All right? By the way, just to make sure that you understand it 2B, are you looking at your book? Do you see the word washed? Do you see that little mark above it? Do you see that little mark above the E in the word washed? What is up with that little mark? It's an accent. What is the accent for? It gets us our 5, ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. But came the waves and washed is actually the way we say it away. Do you got me? So that E, that little thing, hey, do you remember in Romeo and Juliet? I'm mentioning it several times because obviously it's a play from this time. Do you remember when Romeo kills Tybalt and then he's banished? That's exile. And if you watched a performance of this, you notice that when Romeo said the word banished, he didn't say banished, he said banished, banished, banished. For those of you that studied that play and can remember that, banished, it's the same gig. All right? So let's put it in our notes. What's the first thing that happens? He says, I'm walking with my girl on the beach, I write her name in the sand, use a stick or something like that, and the wave came and he washed her name away. Right? The name I had written in the sand. Again, I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. In other words, he says it a second time. Okay, I'm going to write my girl's name in the beach on the sand, but the waves came and washed it away a second time. Now, second movement of the poem. We're going to have a little comment from his girl. the girl whose name he's written on the sand, right? Take a look at what she says. Vain man, silly, here, means silly, like silly boy. Vain man, said she, that dost in vain essay a mortal thing, so to immortalize. In other words, let's put it in our notes this way. She says, you're kind of silly. Writing my name on the beach will not make me live forever. Okay? In other words, why are you writing my name on the beach? Well, because you're my girl, and I want everyone to know that you're my girl. But the waves came and wiped out your name. So I had to write it a second time. But guess what? More waves are always going to come. She says, I am mortal. That is to say, I have to die. I can't be immortalized. It's silly. Notice she says it. For I myself shall like to this decay, and eke my name be wiped out likewise. In other words, she says, you're kind of dumb. I mean, it's sweet. I get it. It's very sweet. You're trying to write my name in the beach, but the way the waves wipe out my name, same problem that I can envision here. I've got to die. I've got to go away, and I'm going to be totally forgotten. Now, the third movement. Take a look at how he responds. And this, of course, will take us to maybe another reason why he wrote these poems in the first place. Not so, quote I. Let baser things devise to die in dust, but you shall live by fame. Whoa, let's write this down. He says something to her that's going to make one or two readers of this poem roll their eyes. He says, no, you're not going to die. You're going to live forever. You're going to be remembered long after you're dead. You can imagine the girls like rolling their eyes going, geez, the guys will say anything to get what he wants. Look how the poem ends. My verse, poems, your virtues rare shall eternize, and in the heavens write your glorious name. In other words, he says, no. You're not going to be forgotten. You're going to be remembered forever because I'm writing poems about you that will be read long after my death and your death. You're going to be remembered forever. You can again imagine. She's rolling her eyes going, oh my goodness, you'll say anything. Where when as death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live, and later life renew. He says, we will be in love forever. And we will all be getting along long after we're dead, you and I, together. Now, of course, let's jot down in our notes what's ironic about this. You can imagine that she rolls her eyes and says, oh man, a guy will say anything to get the girl. But wait a minute, what did you just do? What did you just do? Dude, you just read the poem. You just read the poem about a girl whose name he wrote down. That is to say, he wasn't lying after all. Every time we read this poem, we're reminded of Spenser's girl. And to that degree, he wasn't lying. He said, every time people read my poetry, they're going to remember you. So long after you're dead, you're going to be remembered. You're going to be immortalized. I'm going to take care of that. Of course, the only way for him to be proved right is for her to die, for him to die, and then for a bunch of students at Whirlwind High School to read the poem and go, oh, she's still alive. Their love is still alive, even though they're long dead. Because that's the nature of literature. Long after the fact, the people who write this stuff are still remembered. That word is called fame. It's in this poem, fame. Let's write it down. This may be a second reason for why he writes these poems. One, because he's in love with his girl. Two, because he wants to be remembered. And he wants his girl to be remembered. And so the way he does it is to write a poem. Now let's jump to 3a really quickly as we finish the exegesis of this poem. Question that we're relating to other titles. What is for you your favorite movie where a guy says to the girl, or the girl says to the guy, or some combination of the lovers say to each other, our love will outlive death. And way after us, people will still remember. Right? What is a movie for you that works on that count? What is your favorite love movie? Of all the movies that have to do with love, what is your favorite one? Jot it down. Of course, we've already mentioned Romeo and Juliet. A play written at roughly the same time this poem is being read, and so it's inevitable that when people go and watch the play Romeo and Juliet, they think about this one. In other words, they're going to be remembered long after the fact. Right? Let's jot down 3B really quickly. At 3B, your own personal response to this. Do you think it is the case that love transcends death? Do you buy that idea? Do you think it is the case that people can remember a love between two people long after the fact? Do you think love actually overcomes death? And that death is the one thing which cannot kill love. What an interesting concept. And of course we could ask, are boys silly? Oh, that's a different question. We'll come back to that one later. Thank you.